I didn't want to believe, because I never like to take the internet's word for anything, but wow, Unfrosted is as bad as everyone said it was, which is sort of depressing. I really wanted to be, like, surprised, or at least more interested in it. So as it went on, I was at least pleasantly surprised, I guess would be the word, to discover that it is awful. This is a fascinatingly bad movie, but I kind of love the fact of its existence, if that makes sense. It makes every wrong decision to the point where it almost feels like it's on purpose. It's like the kid failing the test in the Spider-Man movie, where if you get every answer wrong, it has to be on purpose, because statistically you would get at least half of the answers right. Jerry Seinfeld, the director and guy behind and star of this, he's a really talented comedian. I obviously don't agree with all of his current, the wokes have ruined the comedy, whatever bullshit, but that's marketing at this point. He's a genuinely talented comedian, great stand-up, great sitcom star, etc. However much of that you want to attribute to Larry David, certainly Jerry was some of that. He is a fascinatingly terrible big idea guy when he's acting as an auteur, in an auteur context, I should say. This and B-Movie, his cartoon, are both just these eruptions of creativity devoid of challenge. Just these perfect capsules of what happens when someone with the money and power and connection to actually do so can make a whole movie out of whatever idea comes into their head, then also every idea regardless of logistics or taste. For people who only know the memes, by the way, B-Movie was in fact honestly about a bee who falls in love with a human, sues the rest of humanity, but mostly Ray Liotta, to recoup a percentage of honey sales, and then nearly caused an ecological apocalypse by accidentally inventing bee communism. Like, that was a real movie, which he made for children, and this makes that look coherent. You know, anyone shooting the shit with their pals is the thing, could think up Unfrosted's premise of making fun of big business, father of invention movies, like the Steve Jobs movie or The Social Network or whatever, in the context of inventing something silly like the Pop-Tart. You know, like, just get a bunch of drunk people who like to write funny stuff or think they're really funny, sit down in a room and make up a movie, you'd probably get something as full of stupid, sort of funny, half-thought-out ideas as this, but here you get to see people with a lot of money and power that they could actually build the sets and buy the costumes and get a full gigantic cast to do every stupid idea they thought of without giving it another once-over or stopping to question whether any of it was a good idea or whether it was going to work. Actually just do that. It's like what AI-generated movies would be if AI had enough soul to be this stupid. Premise-wise, yeah, this takes place in a version of the 1960s. Jerry Seinfeld is playing a fictional character working at Kellogg during the war in the real town of Battle Creek, Michigan, between whether Kellogg's or Post cereal were going to be the first one to invent a toaster pastry that would be the big deal between the Kellogg's Pop-Tart and the Post Country Square, I think was the real thing. What's weird is, just a digression here, one of my favorite shows, if not my favorite thing on TV to watch as background while I'm working on shows or just sitting around and watching TV, is a show on the History Channel called The Food That Built America, which is a documentary series that is about this same idea, but the real versions of it. That's just history of things like the invention of Pizza Hut. How did KFC come up with the bucket? What was the real story of Colonel Sanders? Why did Dave Thomas quit KFC to go work at Wendy's? Because KFC screwed him out of royalties for inventing the bucket. True story. Learned it from watching that show. What was the actual story of Kellogg's versus Post? Real stories. And what's fun about that show is they tell the real, streamlined, because it's the History Channel version of those stories, but told in the History Channel Built America documentary style, with the dramatic music and the community theater costume recreation actors in pretty good sets and lots of people with elaborate period mustaches and high contrast cinematography and dramatic music, but for things like the guys who invented Buffalo Wild Wings learning that turning on the TV to play sports was a good idea for a bar. And I'm not even bullshitting, that's a real scene in the episode about the invention of Buffalo Wild Wings, with a guy walking into the bar going, "Hey, could you guys turn on the game?" And the two guys behind the bar who invented Wild Wings looking at each other, and the dramatic music slowly rising on the soundtrack, and the narrator going, "Sports in a bar. Dun 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 dun. It was just crazy enough to work." And I'm not sure if that's what really happened, but the show makes it feel... It's a great show. And the thing is, that is funnier, only trying to be a little bit funny, but actually informative, than all of Unfrosted is just making up stupid bullshit. So anyway, forgive the digression there, that I just happen to really like that show, and it's weird that that does a better version for less than half the money and no major actors than this does with all of that. What's weird about Unfrosted is you can sort of see the outline otherwise of what Seinfeld probably wanted to make here a good version. A kind of cartoon, cynical nostalgia riff in a Coen Brothers vein, Hudsucker Proxy most obviously, name-checking his own late boomer consumer nostalgia fixations, but also taking the piss out of the whole era and its own tendency towards self-mythology, so we get like a Cold War space race spoof, but for cereal companies, because haha, that's a funny juxtaposition. But then it can't leave that joke on its own, so we get actual NASA bits mixed into the plot with actual JFK and Khrushchev subplots for no reason that don't go anywhere. Hugh Grant probably has the best bit in the movie playing Thurl Ravenscroft, the actual voice of Tony the Tiger, and here depicted as a washed-up Shakespeare actor who has to wear the Tony mascot costume, which is weird, but okay, there's an idea there. And Grant manages to make it funny because this is now 2 movies I've seen this year where Hugh Grant slumming it as a kind of orange mascot character who doesn't want to be in the movie almost saves parts of a movie. So it decides, hey, what if all the mascots exist as people in suits, and we have the Cornflakes Rooster and Snap, Crackle, and Pop are there, and there's a whole third act plot swerve of them organizing into a J6 rebellion, and there's also a secret Illuminati of milkmen who want to stop Jerry from inventing Pop-Tarts because it'll drop cereal milk sales, which is just a bad version of the Harvey Fierstein plot from Death to Smoochie, which is also a better version of the movie this wants to be. And the company assembles a research team of other wacky 60s comedy types like Chef Boyardee and Tommy Carvel and the guy who invented Sea Monkeys to be a research team, but really because there just needs to be more stuff happening for some reason. And then the characters from Mad Men show up for a cameo as their Mad Men roles, and it doesn't really know what it wants to be. It doesn't have any teeth. It's sort of, Jerry said he wanted it to be the anti-Barbie, and in terms of profitability, it certainly will be, and also in terms of quality. And I guess I can see that in that it wants to be a meaner satire of corporatism instead of a satire of corporatism that says, oh, but it's actually good because you can still get something out of it. But it's mostly just doing weird tangents that doesn't actually have anything to do with what it's doing. And it really does just feel like Jerry Seinfeld and his friends sat down and spitballed a bunch of jokes they wanted to do about TV commercials and brands they remembered from when they were kids. None of it has teeth. It doesn't mean anything. The plot doesn't cohere together. It's full of jokes that look like they laughed a little bit at them and then spent millions building out the props for it. And above all else, no one said no to any of it, which is fascinating to watch, and I'm very glad that the thing of it exists because it has the feel of watching a disaster unfold, and that's interesting from an educational sense, but the movie is very, very bad. But once again, I liked Hugh Grant in it. Hugh Grant is very good. He's really turned into someone I'm always glad to see turn up. The production design is very handsome, though the direction is very flat and uninteresting. But wow, what an unbelievably bad film. An honest-to-God live-action food fight, which would be more interesting, except it almost feels like they tried to make live-action food fight, which is not as interesting as making Food Fight by accident. 3 out of 10. You should see it because it's a disaster, but it is... wow, yeah.